Patricia Gibson.
Mr Deputy Speaker, I have long expressed concern and alarm at the way the energy market simply does not seem to work for consumers, and I have worked with others across this House, most notably the Honourable Gentleman from West-Super-Mare, to try and ensure action on this issue. The fact that this bill seeks to impose a cap on the price of the standard variable tariff and default tariffs, at least until 2020 and possibly longer, is good news for consumers, and particularly for those who don't switch for a whole variety of reasons. The Competition and Markets Authority found in its investigations that there is a lack of engagement in the markets on the part of many consumers, which suppliers are able to exploit by charging high prices. Indeed, some 34% of domestic energy customers had never considered switching supplier, with 56% saying they didn't know if it was possible or didn't know if they had done so in the past. Consumers on standard variable tariffs are much more likely, as we have heard, to be older, disabled, on low incomes, living in rented accommodation and without internet access. And those on these tariffs have not seen their bills fall by much when the cost of providing energy falls. Such savings as are available are passed on only to consumers who are active switchers, as we've heard. But we have to understand that not all consumers can engage in the switching process. So clearly suppliers need to do more to ensure that these customers are not trapped in poor deals. And that means that the poorer you are, the more likely you are to be on the more expensive standard variable tariff, subsidising cheaper electricity deals for the better off. And that cannot be right. And that's essentially what has brought us here today. In my constituency of North Ayrshire and Arran, my constituents are overpaying by £5.5 million a year on energy bills. And this illustrates the need for action in this market. But this action, Mr Deputy Speaker, is much more urgent than the timetable mooted of winter 2018 would suggest. I absolutely welcome this cap, but I'm extremely disappointed that Ofgem has said it will need 5 months to implement it, and we've been told that the cap will be in place for winter 2018. Why not sooner? I'm afraid again the perception raises its head that Ofgem is once again dragging its feet. This bill is indeed welcome, but the focus hereafter must be to fix this broken market. We must have easier, faster ways to switch suppliers for those who can and do. We need more transparent energy bills for consumers, and we need to create the conditions for a much more competitive market than we currently have. I know that some have proposed that one thing to consider is the scrapping of standard variable targets altogether and prohibit all tariffs without an end date, since they themselves prohibit consumer engagement. But that begs the question, Mr Deputy Speaker, as to what energy suppliers can and will do to increase consumer engagement, since we know the figures for switching suppliers, as well as the Competition and Markets Authority investigation showed that consumer engagement is severely lacking for a whole variety of reasons. And isn't it interesting that since there has been political focus on this, with a commitment from all parties to tackle the standard variable tariff rip-off, that we now see some energy companies withdrawing this tariff or seeking to introduce new measures to prevent customers from languishing on it, which shows that so far there has been a lack of will on the part of the bigger companies in particular, but a political focus in itself can help to drive change. I would echo the view that we've heard earlier that we must take care that the action taken in this bill, welcome as it is, it must not lead to higher prices in the longer term. We cannot have a situation where energy providers offset initial price reductions with increases once the cap is removed. And we also need to make sure that consumers who are on a cap default tariff do not lose out as market conditions change in the future. What we need to do is to ensure that when the cap is lifted, what the conditions and criteria for doing so are, and that we are left in the end with a more competitive and fairer market for consumers. We need to know that what the impact of this cap is, and how it can be ensured that there will be no adverse impact on a competitive market. So what is done by the government and the regulator for the period during which this cap is in place really matters. And I'm very keen to hear the Minister's thoughts on this, as we cannot begin too early to prepare for what comes after this cap, whenever it is lifted. We need to know how we can continue to protect consumers and ensure that they have energy deals that are right for them and they are not ripped off as they have been. We cannot go back to business as usual after this cap is removed. We need real and lasting change, and this period where the cap is in place is an opportunity to make that change happen.